What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG. There's decks here and stuff. This one's only going to cost you 10, 12 bucks, and you're not going to see it anywhere else. This, I think, is completely original. Been working on it for a while. This is Red-Black Eldrazi Pingers. Well, what are we doing, really, in this deck? If you're unfamiliar with the term pingers, especially, there are some who call him Tim. We can just, cards that deal 1 damage usually per turn and sort of win in the long run, but usually there are ways to make them deal more than 1 damage a turn. And we've got some ways here, Let's go ahead and show you sort of the 2 cards the deck revolves around. We're playing 4 copies of Molten Nursery and 4 copies of Nettle Drone. Both of these can just, again, deal 1 damage a turn if you have multiple copies of either of them, or 1 copy of each, something like that out, and they just take the game over really, really fast. And sure, sometimes we'll draw a land and that'll be a dead turn for them, which sucks, but we do have a lot of support in this deck for these cards, and again, taking over the long game, Nettle Drone can sometimes deal 2 damage a turn, and Molten Nursery, especially again when you have multiple copies of either of these out, things start getting pretty ugly pretty quick. Both of these, you can redirect the damage to Planeswalkers if you desire. That's really important in this format, And the Molten Nursery can eat up tokens, Hangerback Walker tokens, and other small tokens to secure the waste and things like that. So there's a lot of really important reasons to play these cards too right now. So yes, they form the backbone of the deck, and everything we do is for them, Every single card that's non-land in the deck is colorless. Let's talk removal. We have 9 pieces of removal in the deck, which is pretty respectable, actually. We're a mid-rangey deck, so we have to be able to take things out. We have to be able to block well, but we'll get to that. We're playing 4 copies of Touch of the Void, 2 copies of Complete Disregard, and then 3 copies of Wasteland Strangler, which is backed up really well by the first 2 cards, obviously. Touch of the Void, both of these cards, Complete Disregard and Touch of the Void, they deal with Hangerback Walker really well, and I've already said that Molten Nursery takes care of Hangerback Walker tokens easily, so we do really well against that card. And if this weren't a budget build, ironically, we'd really, really want to play Hangerback Walker. One of the only upgrades I would make at the end of the day is to play Hangerback somewhere in this deck, but we're budget, so at least we can take him out really easily, And both these cards are good against a lot of the other creatures in the format, Mantis Rider included, most notably. So, and anything south of that. So both cards are really actually amazing pieces of removal, especially considering the exile, which is important with Den Protectors and chases and stuff like that running around. Wasteland Strangler is an especially amazing creature, to be honest, for a deck like this. We are running a total of 23 creatures overall in the deck, so that we can have a little bit of offense and a little bit of defense for that matter. We got some good defensive creatures, and Strangler is one of them. We're also playing Ghostfire in this deck, which I'll tell you about in a second. But Ghostfire Blade goes really, really good with this. 4th turn, bust a guy, equip the blade. That's really fantastic. Like I said, we're playing 4 copies of Ghostfire Blade in the deck. Ghostfire Blade is ridiculous, 23 creatures, like I've said. So Ghostfire on pretty much anything is fantastic. A lot of our creatures started at least 3 base power, or can get there, they can get bigger some way or another. So something like Ghostfire Blade is crazy, especially considering it's so cheap. And the fact that it's so cheap, it serves a dual purpose, Once we have a Molten Nursery or Nettle Drone out, we can sort of use this card to kind of storm, It's only the 1 mana, and only the 1 mana to equip. So a lot of turns you can play this and something else and equip it all in the same turn. So we can storm out, deal a few damage with Nettle Drone and Molten Nursery, and equip the blade to something and swing the same turn. There's a lot of blowout plays in this deck, I'm telling you. Into those creatures that we're playing. We're playing 4 copies of Endless One to start things off. Endless One, first of all, is good for all the reasons I just said. Ghostfire Blade is good. There are turns where you might just choose to storm out with this. That's entirely possible. And you can play like Endless One and then a Ghostfire Blade and equip it, and you just gotten 2 triggers on Nursery or the Drone. So, that's a really, really good play. And even though you only played the Endless One for 1 mana, you still have a 3/3. That's not, in no way is that bad. And Endless One is really good late in the game, We are playing Barrage Tyrant later on in this deck, and you can sacrifice a big Endless One to a Barrage Tyrant to just end the game, do 4 or 5 damage pretty easily, honestly. And later on in the game, this guy can be 7, 8, 8, So Endless One is actually really, really flexible, and he's always good once you put the Ghostfire Blade on him, He's just, you pay 3 mana for him, and suddenly you have a 5/5, so it's just ridiculous. 4 copies of Kozilek Sentinel in the deck, really insanely good blocker if we can play this on turn 2. In the last standard, we saw that Sylvan Caryatid was a ridiculously good blocker on turn 2. And, Courser of Krufix was a good blocker, and it had 4 toughness, So playing a 4 toughness blocker instead of, in the case of Caryatid, a 3 toughness blocker on turn 2 is just amazing against every single aggro deck in the format. And again, a blowout play available to us against, aggro and smaller creature-based decks. If we have a Kozilek Sentinel out and then 3 mana open, which we can do the turn after we play Sentinel, if they swing in with 2 creatures, we can block one with Kozilek Sentinel, complete disregard the other, and make Sentinel bigger, often killing the other small creatures. So again, blowout play available to us, although complete disregard is the only instant in the deck, so that's the only combat trick that you can use. But it can sometimes be a 2-for-1, and that is absolutely amazing, especially early in the game against aggro. But Kozilek Sentinel is good all throughout the game, and you can make her a little bit bigger in swing if that's what you want to do, but mostly she's in there to clog up the board early. 4 copies of Forerunner of Slaughter. Again, a lot of really good plays available with this thing, I've already said we've got Endless One, so later on in the game we can make a huge Endless One swing in suddenly, just out of nowhere, That's good. We've also got, we're going to play Vile Aggregate, but not too many copies. So again, play a huge Aggregate later on in the game when we're in a board stall, swing in with him, he's huge, So, and, on the 5th turn, what's really cool to do sometimes is Wasteland Strangler, kill a guy, equip Ghostfire Blade, and give him haste, Kill a guy on the 5th turn and swing in for 5 is really, really good. Forerunner enables all this and more, and on the 2nd turn he's a 3-power guy, which is not only good for aggro, but good against aggro, because you can at least trade with pretty much everything. 2 copies of Vile Aggregate in the deck. I don't want to play too many of them, he's a really good top deck later on in the game, but he's not really good on curve at all. He'll only be like 2 power on curve. Ever. So, again, and we're playing so many, you probably noticed, we're playing a lot of 3-drops in the deck, so I want to restrict how many 3-drops we play, but in a budget build of this deck, I definitely want to play Aggregate. I think he's the most cuttable card, though. If we were going to go the Hangerback Walker route, he would be the first thing to go, I think. But still, he's fantastic later on in the game, and he's, again, really good with Forerunner, and pretty good with Barrage Tyrant, too. Speaking of, 2 copies of Barrage Tyrant to finish off the creatures, actually to finish off the main deck here. Really quick main deck. Barrage Tyrant is crazy. Later on in the game, he just provides reach, is a really, really good finisher. And I've already said, a lot of our creatures start at 3 power or can get there if we need them to. So, a lot of the time, and we have Ghostfire Blade in the deck, that's awesome too. And you can actually fling the Nettle Drone at him, tap the Nettle Drone, deal a damage, and then fling the Nettle Drone at him for another 3 damage, So, 4 damage in a turn, not bad. We used to call that Boros Charm. Barrage Tyrant's good and swings in pretty well by himself. 5 power, 5 mana, not bad at all. 23 lands in the deck. This is all we really need to do. If you had Bloodstained Mires or Smoldering Marshes, totally do that. That would be better. But we really just need swamps and mountains here. And I've elected to do Evolving Wilds, mostly to thin our decks so we don't draw as many lands and we can play more colorless things. That's pretty important. Fetches would do that for us if we have them instead. So, but still, I don't want to play too many lands, again, because we're wanting to mostly just draw colorless cards. We don't have that many things at all, or any really, that draw cards. So we want to play as few lands as possible that we can get away with, and I think 23 is about right. Here's our sideboard. Not much to say other than Transgress the Mind could easily be in the main deck. We don't have much to do on the 2nd turn in the main deck, but there's so many 3-drops, and I guess you could drop Vile Aggregate and play Transgress the Mind in the main if you wanted to do that. I couldn't begrudge you that because, again, we're not doing much on the 2nd turn other than Sentinel and Forerunner, but hey, that's, 2-4 of 2-drops, so maybe there isn't room for Transgress. Here are your power rankings right here. Really good. 57 is your final score. Not bad for a deck that's only going to cost you $10, $12. Low prices on TCG Player. And it can really take over in the long game. A lot of decks want to establish a pretty good board state. Morph decks want to do that, which are still a thing, the green-white morph deck. And even Jeskai will go late on into the game. The ramp deck goes pretty late into the game. And once we get to there, we can actually outpace a lot of decks really well. It's decent against control if we can resolve either of our pingers, because whether we resolve spells or not, we still get to do damage. And those games tend to go really long anyway, which games that go long actually favor us because we're dealing a fair amount of damage every single turn. The longer the game goes, the higher percentage we have of winning. That's all I got for now, but I got a bunch of stuff planned here. We're getting backlogged. I'm trying to get it all done by Christmas, But I've been taking your suggestions and stuff, and I've been working on some things of my own. We are doing mono white soon. I'm going to do budget mono green Stompy pretty soon. I want to do Teamer Woodland Wanderer with morph creatures. I want to try that out. I think we can make like a 5 or 6/6 Wanderer fairly easily. Want to try that out. And then Calastria Healer combo with Rally the Ancestors. I want to try that too. Really cool concept. The only creatures you play at all are Calastria Healers. Maybe Zilliport Cutthroats, but probably just healers. You sacrifice them to Evolutionary Lead. You try to fill up your graveyard with 4 of them and rally them all back at the same time. If you rally back 4 Calastria Healers, you just did 16 damage and gained 16 life. So that's a cool combo right there. And you can do it pretty easily if you're playing an Evolutionary League and only Calastria healers. I'm Dev. If you enjoyed the content, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. We need it, and we love you guys for doing it. Please comment. I want to know how you feel about this one and all the decks we got coming up. I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.